Are you looking for wisdom, courage, and guidance on your journey as a changemaker? Grab your headphones, a warm drink, and possibly a notebook. You're going to want to take notes. You've found your new favorite podcast. Welcome to Become a Good Ancestor, a podcast hosted by Layla Saad. Layla is a New York Times and Sunday Times best-selling author, an international speaker, and a globally respected teacher on the topics of race, identity, leadership, personal transformation, and social change. In each episode, Layla interviews some of the world's most inspiring authors of color who are changing the world with their words. From memoirs to manifestos, poetry to pop culture, science to social justice, and everything in between. Join Layla as she dives deep with BIPOC authors who are showing us the way to healing and liberation. This is a place for people who want to help change the world, in honor of those who have come before us, and in service to those who will come after we are gone.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 8 of Become a Good Ancestor podcast. I'm your host, Layla Saad, and this is the place where inner work meets social change. Today, I'm speaking with author Priya Malhotra. Priya has been a writer and journalist in New York for over 20 years and has contributed to publications such as Newsday, Timeout New York, The Times of India, The Japan Times, Asian Art News, Cosmopolitan, and News India Times. She has a master's degree in journalism from Columbia University in New York City and a bachelor's degree in literature. She grew up in New Delhi, India. Priya's debut novel is called Woman of an Uncertain Age. The story is a unique coming-of-age journey of a middle-aged woman set in the art world of New York City. In the novel, Nana Mehta, a 50-something Indian immigrant widow with grown children in the United States, chooses to spurn the traditional image of the aging Indian widow, dressed in subdued colors and focused solely on her children and God. After she loses her husband, she embarks on a unique and bold journey by moving to New York from New Jersey, falling in love with her daughter's boyfriend, distancing herself from the Indian community, and having a relationship with a Pakistani man, much to her Islamophobic son's chagrin. Throughout the novel, Nana wrestles with questions like maternal love and moral responsibility versus self-love, and romantic and professional cares versus her own wants and desires. But when she blossoms into a richer version of herself, we see her consciously negotiating the boundaries between selfhood, womanhood, and motherhood on her own terms. We'll be talking all about Woman of an Uncertain Age with Priya and with our community this month in the book club. To find out more about the book and to join us in the book club, visit becomeagoodancestor.com/book club. Welcome to the show, Priya.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm honored to be here.
It is an honor to have you. Before we get started, let's let people know where they can find your work online.
Well, to find the book, you can find it on Amazon.com. You can find it on Barnes & Noble. You can find it on bookshop.org. You can go to my website, priyamalhotra.com. You can reach out to me via Facebook. You can reach out to me via Twitter or Instagram.
Excellent. Thank you. Now let's ask our questions about the ancestors. Who are some of the ancestors, living or transitioned, societal or familial, who have influenced you on your journey?
Many, I would say, have influenced me. The first I'd like to start with are my grandmothers, paternal and maternal. By the time I remember them, they were both widowed. And they always wore white saris. And I never got a clear answer why. Well, they just liked it. They were old. It was cultural. Well, maybe they even wore it when their husbands were alive. I don't know. I wasn't there when their husbands were alive, but it always struck me as very strange. Why were they always in white? So it really made me think about what widowhood meant. Because as we know in the West, widowhoods, white, the color white is a symbol of purity and virginity, which is why Christian brides wear it, Jewish brides also, I think, wear it. And whereas in India, brides typically wear red, which is the color of pleasure, because marriage is associated, hopefully, with pleasure, specifically of the carnal kind and of other kinds as well. So they would wear, so you would wear subdued colors. It's almost like color is life, color is joy. So, by stripping away all the color, it's like almost you've stripped away all the joy. And so I never really saw them wear much jewelry or, Indian women really like to deck up. And I always wondered about that. And so that was clearly an influence for me. And then, and on the other hand, was my aunt, my mother's sister, who passed away last year. She was a bold and audacious woman. She traveled to America on a ship by herself to study English literature at Bryn Mawr, and then went to Stratford-upon-Avon in England and got her PhD in Shakespeare. She wrote 2 books on Shakespeare and became the head of the Department of English Literature at Delhi University. She was a feisty woman, and I was very close to her. And so, she was very particular about language and stories and, how one speaks. And, so, there I got the idea, well, probably subconsciously, well, if Urmila aunty can write a book, well, maybe I could too.
Yeah.
And also, storytelling is a huge part of, oral storytelling is a huge part of Indian culture, specifically gossip. And, gossip is, so, but even gossip has, narrative structure,
Yeah.
Then this happened, and then that happened. And then can you believe he met so-and-so?
Right.
And that happened. So, I was there because my brother was 9 years older than me. So I spent a lot of time with my mother and my aunts and other ladies who gossiped frequently or spoke about people frequently. And, there was a kind of a narrative to it. And maybe, subconsciously I picked up on it, how do you tell a story? So, they were all, ancestors that helped me, and my teachers, I would say, as well, because I was writing from the time I was maybe 10.
Wow.
Essays. At 16, 17, really bad romantic poems called with names like Longing. Thank God they're nowhere to be found.
They've been buried.
I have no idea where they are. My mother's disorganization has helped me in that way. And then at about, my friend and I, that's not an ancestor, that's a peer, but we would love what was called, you might know because you're British, a Mills and Boon novel.
Okay.
A romantic story.
Yep.
Similar in America to Harlequin romances. So I would read a lot of that along with other stuff. And then we said, we must write one with, a man called Damien and, somewhere in posh London setting and, and do that. And, that was, because we were very colonized. My family was English speaking, we were, there was a lot of British influence and all of this, and all of that, and in terms of ancestors, because of that British influence, probably why there's a particular probably kind of English that you probably notice. Somebody called it like slightly a Victorian style.
A little bit. I was saying to you that when you were, explaining about your aunt and kind of your background, I was like, this actually makes so much sense now because, as I was reading the book, there's the story of what's happening to the protagonist and the characters there. And then there's the particular art of the way that you write. And it was like, wow, like that in itself, like I would reread sentences where I'm like, wow, like she's telling us the story, but she's also giving like this prose that's very artful and very intentional and very vivid. Like it's painting a picture, but it's also painting like the internal emotions as well. And it took me a minute to kind of get used to it. I was like, and then once I got into it, I was like,
it does, because it's a very interior novel. It's a psychological novel. A lot of it, and I had trouble selling it for that reason, because there's not as much action as in what happens inside her head.
Yes. Your protagonist has a very rich, as I think we all do, but a very rich internal life.
Exactly. You got it.
Mm-hmm.
And that was what I was trying to, capture, rather than, there's like a car chase and now there's this and now that happens. And, there isn't that much action in terms of that. It's a lot about inner life. Like, even my language choices. I just told my daughter, don't be so impertinent.
Yes, and I laughed when I heard you.
And my husband, who grew up mostly in America, but the first 10 years of his life in Guyana, South America, he said, how pretentious of you to say that. Because for him, that's like the kind of English that's pretentious,
Right.
People say rude, or, don't be rude, or don't be, but a word like impertinent, which by reading a Victorian, it just comes out.
Right. That's your language. That's the way that you
speak. That is my language.
Yes. Yeah. How does it
and that
feel?
Came from my ancestors.
Yeah. How does it feel now to have this book out in the world? Like, this is your first book, and we'll talk a little bit more about, how you got the idea, where the idea came from. But how does it feel as a first-time novelist, like to be
It's not out yet. September 20th.
It will be by the time people listen, though. So we're celebrating it in advance.
You know what? It feels really exciting. And my hope is that people will actually read it. It feels great that it's out in the world, but, just like a baby, you don't know, is it going to be read? Is it not going to be read? Because I would like it to, for people to rethink what midlife means.
Yes.
I would like people to rethink what a good mother means, or not rethink, but think about, rather.
Yeah.
What any of this what any of this means? What are relationships? What does it mean? To be a female in midlife.
Mm-hmm. And this is why we wanted to read your book for our book club. So we'll definitely be reading it. I can tell you that. Us and our book club members will be reading it.
I've worked on it for more than 10 years. How many times I edited it? It really was a labor of love and sweat.
Yeah. Well, we honor you and we celebrate you, and we're excited for our members to be reading it. Let's talk about the story itself, because it is a very unique story. And I want to shout out and give gratitude to Rima Zaman, our book club facilitator, who'll be on later in this conversation. She's the one who introduced me to your work, to you and your work. And in a meeting where we were discussing, okay, which books, would we want to feature next? And she said, I've got this great book that I actually wrote a blurb for. It's by this Indian author. It tells the story of a middle-aged, 50-something-year-old Indian woman, an immigrant who becomes a widow and starts her life brand new. Instead of becoming that widow who, like you said, wears white, sort of her life kind of comes to an end at that point and her focus should only be family and God, begins a whole new life, right? And
Right.
I just thought, I've never read that story. I've never heard that story. I've never seen it in a TV show, in a movie. I mean, we know, and I know you've written about this, there is currently I think it's a movie, right? That's featuring Emma Thompson, where she's kind of having...
I talked about that in a blog,
Yes. Yes.
About that. And that's received a lot of attention in itself for its portrayal of people's sexuality. And, I salute Rima for, in introducing my book. I'm very, very grateful to her. And she's an excellent author, an excellent person. And just, and I'm most grateful.
Strongly agree.
Yes. And so, she's, but I think that there's, a kind of there's kind of an interest in this kind of thing because, the publishing industry tends to focus, being the capitalist beast that it is, on young women.
Yeah.
That's not, the 50 plus story, even though older women read much more books.
Right.
Right. So, it's actually quite illogical that they would prefer to have, like, young women featured. It's I also really wanted to play with the term coming of age. We associate the term coming of age with somebody young, traditionally young, or an adolescent, a teenager. So what does it mean if you come of age in your 50s?
Yeah.
Who said that it was only reserved for that for that age group? So, I really wanted to play with that term.
Dear good ancestor, are you feeling inspired by our guest's amazing work towards creating social change? You're probably here because you're passionate about fighting the isms. You know the ones: racism, sexism, classism, and ableism, to name just a few. You're here to do the work that matters. And as important as that work is, I know it can also be exhausting. Trust me, I've been there too. Here's what I've learned. When we want to fight social injustice and build a better world, we tend to lead with a burning passion. And this can also lead to burnout and a vicious cycle of feeling like we're not doing enough. That's why I created Claim Your Space, our course that sets you up to be a powerful change maker without compromising rest and joy. It took me a long time to be able to claim my space in creating social change. And I want to support you in claiming your own space and help you do the work in a way that is right for you. Are you ready to start making a difference in a sustainable and joyful way? To start your journey, sign up for Claim Your Space at becomeagoodancestor.com/claim-your-space. Tell us about the story. What inspired you to write the story? Where did this protagonist come from? Because like I said, I've never heard of this. Not only, I mean, we've discussed that, movies like the Emma Thompson one, but even then I'm like, I haven't seen it with an Indian story though. Like I haven't seen it with a BIPOC, a black or brown protagonist. So where did this come from? Because there's all other cultural layers when we're talking about coming of age,
Yes.
right? Older, and you add the cultural layers.
Well, it came from, like my mother was 62 and became a widow. And, I would tease her and said, now you should just get married again. And it was like saying, you should go to Mars. It was, not that she was interested and was denied, but it was just such a foreign concept that it was like people would laugh at me when I would say it. And nobody really thought about a woman of that age getting married and things like that. I didn't really know people who did that, and if they were probably very, very high society or celebrity, like really alternative, and they did it, and that was just them. But
Right.
I didn't really know people who did that. And I went to a wedding in Chicago of a friend, and I met a girl who was studying to be a psychotherapist. She was in her late 20s, and we got talking. And she told me her father died. She grew up in America. And sometimes people who grew up in America, Indians, tend to be more conservative than people who grew up in India.
Wow.
Because they're often holding on to whatever the culture that, maybe let's say they came in 1975 to that, whereas the people in India are looking to move on.
Right.
So they may often be more conservative. Not every time. It's a gross generalization. But, and she told me her father died, and, I was talking about whether, and I'm going to call her C, did she have a boyfriend? And she said, my two sisters say mom will find a boyfriend before you. And I was like, mom find a boyfriend? I imagine the mom would be in her 50s, and the idea of a 50-plus woman and boyfriend was just, it was like an oxymoron. So, so I said to her, wow, can you show me a picture of your mother? Imagining her in like mini skirts and some, really hip, cool woman, she was in a sari, traditional, her hair tied. And I'm like going, this woman? And, I had to reset my own expectations.
Right. You're thinking like, this is a desi auntie, like
this is not auntie, right? Like an auntie.
Yeah.
Aunties don't have boyfriends. When you're an auntie, I played with the term auntie, like aunties don't have boyfriends, or it's funny if they do, like, and so then she told me that her mother actually had a boyfriend. And I was like, she has a boyfriend? So she said, my mother asked me a strange question and I didn't know how to answer it. I said, what did she ask you? Being, the nosy journalist that I am, she said, my boyfriend, that's the mother's boyfriend, C's mother's boyfriend, said that, he likes her to do something sexually to him, but he will not reciprocate in kind. And what should I do about it? C's mother's asking her, and I'm looking at the desi auntie and I'm going, what?
Your brain is just like not understanding.
I'm like, what? This is like, what? And I'm like, who is this woman? Why is this, And, and the daughter was clearly confused too. And I was like, wow, this desi auntie in a sari, is wondering about this. And that's where it took root. Not that it's a story about sex or anything like that, because it's not. But I wondered then, if a woman of that age, what friend would she have had to ask such a question to? They would have judged her.
Yeah.
For having a boyfriend, I imagine.
Yeah.
Your husband has died, your daughters are not married, and you're thinking about, your own sexual pleasure. Yeah. What kind of woman are you?
Right.
So who could she have asked?
Yeah.
Unless, and there's a stigma about going to therapists, and there's all of that. So she just, I think, in a vulnerable moment, I'm imagining, asked her daughter, and that's where I started imagining what it must be like to be her mother.
Yeah.
And there was no, in this case, in the reality, she never fell in love with her daughter's boyfriend or anything. But then I imagined, could that happen?
Right. Because you take this story, like the root of this thing that you saw and experienced, and you
To a completely different level.
A different level, right? Let's talk about, and once we do this, I'd love to bring Rima on as well. But let's talk about one of the main, there are several themes actually throughout the story. There's, what it means to be a woman, what it means about like self-authorship and starting a career again, right? Or a career
Right.
for a career in a real way where it's not voluntary work. It's like, this is my career. There's the grieving of the husband who's passed. There's the rejection of the Indian community. But a really big part of it is her role as a mother and her relationship with her daughter, who's also a therapist in this story,
yes.
right? And her son, and what, they think of her and what they want from her and what they want from themselves. But the scandal that you create in this story, Priya, which, this is not a reveal, it's in the blurb, but she, forms feelings for her daughter's boyfriend.
Which is scandalous in any culture.
Any culture,
Any culture. It is totally scandalous. So, I asked a few women if that had ever happened, and they knew people who this had happened to.
Wow.
Where they did. But, the way I tried to do it, whether I succeeded or not remains to be seen, was to do it in a way where there's a lot of self-denial. Oh, I'm just doing it. He's a nice boy. I must go out with him. I must get to know my son-in-law to be better. Because, this can't be, she was not going to acknowledge and come out initially and say, no, I like him.
It's a huge taboo. I mean, it was a huge taboo.
I think partly maybe she's jealous of her daughter and for the opportunity she's had.
Yeah.
Even while she's a mother. The other thing is that she particularly likes this man, and nobody's given her that kind of attention ever.
Right.
And that is a taboo that she doesn't fully cross in her mind. She keeps, sometimes we all have delusions about things, we think we're doing the right thing, we're doing something wrong, but we justify it and we say, but no, it's the right thing because A, B, C. Human beings do that to themselves. They'll stay in a bad relationship, an abusive relationship, but he's a good guy, or, we'll all find excuses. But when she finds out, there's like a selfishness takes over.
Right.
But I didn't take it further because I don't think that a mother who's falling in love with her daughter's boyfriend and actually taking him is a very sympathetic character.
No.
No, and so, there has to be guilt. It has to be laced with guilt.
Yes.
Because there's, it's a huge taboo. Anybody from any culture I say that to always looks at me shocked.
Yeah.
That, how did this happen? But I could see, I was hearing of a story of, mothers who would dress provocatively in front of their daughters, friends and things. Maybe they'd never got that attention.
Right.
And they wanted it. Maybe they thought they were entitled to it.
Right. Yeah.
And also, living in America for so long, you learn so much about entitlement.
Right. You know what I really appreciated though as well, Priya, was that in itself could be like the story, like the whole story is that, right?
Right.
But what I actually appreciated, and again, not to give anything away to your readers, but what I appreciated was that was a moment that really then opened her up to exploring herself and other possibilities of relationships with other people, as well as herself. And then that redemption story with her daughter as well. That's what I really appreciated. Like, it wasn't just this guy just came in and screwed things up for her completely, right? But what happens even after that?
Yeah, that I found. Thank you very much. I really appreciated it. Appreciate that because that was very interesting to me. Okay, so what? Okay, so the guy rejects you, all of that, but what happens? Does the daughter realize what's happened? Can somebody forgive somebody after what they've done? Is forgiveness possible even?
Right.
After that, like that's an open question. And if you see, her daughter makes barbed remarks throughout.
Yeah.
Even later, she doesn't always fully get over it. She can empathize with it, but it doesn't. And then I also wanted to play with the idea of authority, because generally, there's this idea that children are hiding from parents. Oh, if I'm doing weed, I don't want my parents to know. If I'm not studying, what happens when the parent has to hide from the child? It's a role reversal in authority. If she's hiding from her son, she's hiding from her daughter.
Yeah.
So, I really wanted to play with that role reversal. What happens when that happens?
Yeah.
When the mother is naughtier than the children.
Right. She was
or perceives herself to be.
Yeah, she's keeping secrets. I love it. So let's bring on Rima, our book club facilitator and the person who introduced us to your work.
Yes, the wonderful Rima.
Yeah, she's going to be leading discussions this month in the book club with our members there on the themes in your book. So Rima, I'll let you take it away. I'll disappear for a little while. I'm here in the background, but I'll let you take it away.
Thank you so much, Layla. This was a really fun conversation.
Thank you, Layla. And thank you, Priya. I love your novel so much.
Oh, thank you.
And all the complex themes. Yeah. And especially when you were just talking about how, when your main character starts to have feelings for and then acts on her feelings for her daughter's significant other, and just the complexity of that and the brave choice that you made to explore that, especially given that it's a taboo across culture. And it's a form of, I see it as a form of betrayal against her daughter, but then also I felt such a compassion for the character and her wanting to do it, and that's like the best kind of writing, is when we're torn, where we feel this revulsion, but at the same time, a compassion.
Oh, that's a great compliment. Thank you.
Yeah. And those are my favorite kind of protagonists, where they're so layered. I just have mixed feelings about them. At the same time, I completely understand. And it's almost like I saw it as she was living out desires that she wasn't allowed.
Yes.
Earlier in her life. And she's, in many, I think a lot of mother-daughter relationships are mothers to a certain degree until they self-actualize themselves. Like when a woman becomes a mother very young, it's almost like her journey for self-actualization has been interrupted by this new squalling, wailing baby, right? And she's supposed to find complete contentment in her child or her role as a mother, but that's not logical, and it's certainly not fair. What about her creativity, her passion, her career, her intellectual capacity, her potential in all these other areas of a human being's personhood? And so I saw that, and I see that in a lot of mother-daughter relationships, where if the mother isn't allowed to fully express herself in all the facets of herself, it will start being a point of contention, right? With, and how you said, like a lot of mothers like dress provocatively in front of their daughter's friends and things like that. And I think, again, it's like trying to buck up against the strict role and category of mother, right? Like angelic mother, and saying like, no, there's other parts of me. There's my sexuality, there's my passion, there's my creativity. And so I saw her feelings for this man as being an extension of that, of her really exercising her personhood. And maybe specifically because it's in a taboo way, that's why it felt even more exhilarating, because she's not supposed to do that. As a good mother, she wasn't supposed to do that.
To feel a bit exhilarating, it was it meant to be, because it is so taboo.
Exactly.
That she couldn't admit it to herself.
Totally.
For the longest time. And, the layers of delusion.
Mm-hmm.
As you know, we all have layers of delusion.
Right. Yeah. And I have a very close relationship with my mom, and I've always been so grateful that she's never tried to inhibit my self-expression from a resentment of what her life didn't allow her while she was my age. She just has always pursued her own self-expression and professional expression and expansion at the same time as not trying to compete with mine or my sisters, and always just being our biggest fan. But I know that is a very rare combination at the same time. Yeah.
That's wonderful.
And because she
Your
had an
mother is
arrangement.
very inspirational. I read your book, so I know.
Yeah. And, she could have definitely felt so resentful, especially of me, since I'm the product of an arranged marriage, and I was the oldest, and she was so young when she had me, and I interrupted her professional dreams. And she became a full-time mom suddenly after wanting to be a professor. And she was studying to be a professor, and then I suddenly arrived. And but instead of ever, subconsciously holding me back because she wasn't able to fully actualize in her 20s, she just went ahead and fully actualized her creative and professional dreams in her 20s because I interrupted her path. She always supported me, and then she resumed her path in parallel to mine as well. And now she's studying for her PhD, which she doesn't need to, but she is, because she's like, why not? Life is short. I'm going to keep on getting degrees and doctorates and all these things as long as I want, which I think is just amazing. She's in her 60s and she's still doing
an amazing woman. I was actually thinking about your mother when I remember I reread your book recently, and I thought of my own character, because she's somebody who, I don't know at what age, probably in her 40s, that she left her husband and remarried, and
right.
Kind of reinvented herself at
42. Yeah.
At part two, not exactly midlife, but not exactly youth,
Right.
And which I found it's quite unusual.
It's very unusual, completely. She was the one who pursued her divorce, and then she started dating, and she met my stepdad, and she was like, yep, this is my person. And it was almost like, after, she would be a perfect person to speak to you about your book and have that as a recorded interview, actually. She would be perfect because of like she's lived in many ways a lot of the parallel decisions that your characters have. And
right,
because she was so, after living such the first 40 years of her life as the quintessential good girl from a subcontinental country, from Bangladesh, she was just like, no, I'm going to be the author of my own life. The moment she was like, she initiated that divorce, and then she just became the author of her own life. And she never looked back.
Well, if I remember right, when she met your stepdad, I think you guys were like, that soon, or something. You guys,
But he's been our dad for almost 20 years, right? And obviously worked out. My initial reaction, as anyone who's read my book, I was very protective of her, and my entire life, up till that moment had been about protecting her. And so I was when I was reading your book, I could certainly empathize with the daughter's character very much about, and I could even read between the lines why she decided to become a therapist. Because in subcontinental culture, like therapy is very taboo in and of itself.
Very taboo.
Right? Talking about one's emotions, they're already taboo. Examining each other's emotions and trauma histories and childhood. So I see the daughter as being able to, she is such an expression of self-determination. So Priya, my question for you, because we've heard your influences from outside influences for the book, what does the book mean for you? What's the personal connection that drove you to write this book, or what is the personal impact it has had?
I think it allowed me to explore myself in a way, my own contradictions, my own feelings. Perhaps, I'm a bit like my protagonist, Nana, a little bit, lost in fantasy. Perhaps, it allowed me to explore, could I actually do something like that? Like fall in love with my daughter's boyfriend. I never want my daughter to hear that. But, like it allowed me to really get into somebody else's skin. And, I know you were studying to be, or you were looking to study to be a therapist, and that is something I've always been very interested in, psychology. And, it allowed me to live in somebody else's skin. And yet, in a way, it was my skin too.
That's amazing.
There's my personal connection.
Yeah. Thank you, Priya. I'm super excited to explore the book further with our community in September.
Yes.
And we're going to have a very lively discussion. I'll see you again at the end of the month when we do our fireside chat. Yes.
Yes, I can't
Thank
wait.
you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rima, for that. That was wonderful. Priya,
thank you. It was amazing.
Been a pleasure to have you. I just want to thank you for writing a book that really challenged us to flip the script, right? Turn our brain inside out and really think about what if things don't take the normal course that we're used to and, take a different course. And actually, I think while this is a very unique story in the sense that I've never seen it or read it, just listening to Rima talk about, her own mother, I'm like, no, wait a minute. I have read this story. I have heard this. And it's this reminder that, we're just all so different. We're all coming from different experiences, and we shouldn't assume that there's one right path or one right way of being. And I think your book really reminds us of that. So my final question for you is, what does it mean to you to become a good ancestor?
What it means to me to become a good ancestor is to pass on values of secularism, honesty, justice, social justice, love, kindness, compassion, a love of literature, and also to pass on Indian culture to my children and, to people around, and to people around the world. I've just come back from India, and, it has such a rich, rich culture, whether it's in terms of architectural marvels, history, art, music. It's just amazing. And so for me to be a good ancestor, I want to pass on, Indian culture as well as good values, but also tolerance and respect for all cultures and all people. That's what it means for me to be a good ancestor.
That is beautiful. And I love seeing you doing that. Thank you so much, Priya. This was a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for listening. We hope you've enjoyed learning about today's author and their incredible work. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast and leave us some love with a rating and review. You can find us wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube. And of course, don't forget to buy the book we talked about today. We're on a mission to center and celebrate BIPOC authors, and you can help us do that by sharing this episode and the book. You can join us in our book club to dive deeper into today's book. Visit becomeagoodancestor.com/book club to find out more. For more inspiration and learning, you can find us at becomeagoodancestor.com and become_a_good_ancestor on Instagram. Thank you for being on the journey with us as we strive to become good ancestors, in honor of those who have come before us and in service to those who will come after we are gone.